I am Owen. I'm 36 years old, and my wife and her family secretly plotted to take over the house I bought long before I ever met her. Before I tell you about the security camera footage that led to a divorce and exposed their entire scheme, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday. I remember the sky was a flat, boring gray, the kind of day that promises nothing. I was in the most important meeting of my career. I'm an architect, and for months, I'd been pursuing a contract to design a new, avant-garde wing for the Sterling Hotel Group. The man across the table was Mr. Sterling himself, a developer with a legendary reputation for being ruthless but having an impeccable eye for talent. He was old school, a man whose respect you had to earn, not just with a presentation but with conviction. I was on the verge of earning it. My blueprints, the culmination of 1,000 sleepless hours, were spread across the vast mahogany table. I was guiding him through the centerpiece, a 3-story glass atrium designed to make guests feel like they were standing inside a sunbeam. The load-bearing structure is integrated into the mullions themselves, Mr. Sterling. I was saying, my voice resonating with a confidence I had practiced for weeks. So the effect is one of effortless transparency. My phone, set to silent mode, buzzed against my leg. A single, discreet vibration. I ignored it, probably a spam email. It buzzed again, a more persistent, insistent pulse this time. I subtly shifted in my seat, a flicker of annoyance breaking my concentration. Mr. Sterling had paused, his sharp blue eyes fixed on me, missing nothing. "Everything all right, son?" "Yes, sir. My apologies," I said, my voice smooth despite the interruption. "Just a minor notification." A third buzz, immediately followed by a rapid-fire series of them. A frantic staccato against my leg. This wasn't normal. This was an alert. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. With a muttered apology, my professional facade starting to crack, I glanced down at my phone. The screen was a nightmare of red notification banners from my home security app. Motion detected. Front door. Front door opened. Unknown code. Motion detected. Living room. System alarm triggered. Potential intrusion. My blood ran cold. I just had the system installed 2 weeks ago after a few minor break-ins in the neighborhood. My finger trembled as I tapped the notification to open the live camera feed. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought Mr. Sterling could hear it. The phone screen showed my living room, the space I designed and built with my own hands, my sanctuary. But it wasn't empty. 2 people were standing there, surrounded by ugly, taped-up cardboard boxes. It was my brother-in-law, Leo, and his wife, Chloe. Leo, with a smug, proprietary look on his face, was directing Chloe to put a box down on my handcrafted coffee table. A box crudely labeled in thick black marker, "Leo's Stuff Master Guest." The piercing shriek of the alarm was faintly audible through the phone's microphone. A desperate, electronic scream, but they seemed to be ignoring it entirely. As I watched, paralyzed with disbelief, Leo walked over to my prized leather armchair, the one I'd saved for a year to buy, and flopped into it like he owned the place, kicking his feet up on the ottoman. Then, through the wide bay window in the video feed, I saw it. The flashing red and blue lights of a police car, painting my meticulously manicured front lawn in strokes of pure panic. My carefully constructed world, my career-defining meeting, it all shattered in that one silent, horrifying moment. Mr. Sterling was still looking at me, his expression shifting from curiosity to genuine concern. Owen couldn't breathe. I shot to my feet, my chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. "Mr. Sterling," I managed to say, my voice a strained, unrecognizable whisper. "I am so sorry. There's been a break-in at my home. I have to go." And I ran. I ran out of that meeting, leaving my blueprints, my ambition, and my professional composure scattered on that table, all to confront the nightmare that had just kicked down the door to my life. Before you can understand the sheer violation I felt watching that screen, you have to understand what that house meant to me. It wasn't just wood and drywall and glass. It was my anchor in a world that had always felt like a temporary rental. It was the fulfillment of a promise I'd made to a lonely, 10-year-old version of myself. I didn't have a picture-perfect childhood. My dad was a decent man, a hard worker, but his trade was specialized, and he chased jobs wherever they appeared. That meant we chased him. From an apartment in Ohio to a duplex in Arizona, a rented house in Texas, back to a different town in Ohio. I attended 9 different schools before I graduated high school. I was perpetually the new kid, the outsider trying to decipher the social codes of a place I knew I wouldn't be for long. My bedroom was never truly mine. It was just a temporary box filled with second-hand furniture. A room I knew I'd be leaving within a year or two. I never had a wall to cover with posters, never a door frame to mark my height on, never that sense of permanence that other kids took for granted. I remember one move particularly vividly. I was 10. We were in a small town in Nebraska. For a whole year, I'd had a real friend, a kid named Sam. We'd built a sprawling, magnificent treehouse in the woods behind his house. It was our fortress, our spaceship, our castle. It was the most permanent thing in my life. The day my dad told us we were moving to Illinois, I ran to the treehouse to tell Sam. He just looked at me, confused, and said, "But who's going to help me defend the fort?" The simple finality of his question broke my heart. I wasn't just losing a friend. I was abandoning my post. I was leaving again. That night, sitting amongst the boxes, I made a vow to myself. One day, I would build a fort that I would never have to leave. That dream became my obsession. It fueled me through college, through the grueling late nights of my internship. When I got my first real job as a junior architect at 23, I didn't do what most guys my age did. I didn't buy a fancy car or go on wild vacations. I opened a separate, high-yield savings account. The first line item on the statement read, "Project Sanctuary." For 13 years, that account was my religion. Every promotion, every bonus, every freelance project I took on the side. A significant chunk of that salary went straight into that fund before I even saw it. I drove a 10-year-old Honda until the mechanic knew me by name. I learned to cook so I wouldn't waste money eating out. I packed brown bag lunches every single day, enduring good-natured teasing from my colleagues. They'd talk about their trips to Europe or their new sound systems, and I'd just smile and nod, picturing the concrete of my future foundation getting poured, picturing the frame of my fortress rising against the sky. Finally, at 36, I did it. I didn't just buy a house. I bought a piece of land. A small, overlooked lot with a massive 200-year-old oak tree in the center that everyone else saw as an obstacle. I saw it as the heart. I spent the next year of my life designing and overseeing the construction of my dream. Every angle, every window placement, every material was a deliberate choice. I knew the name of the guy who framed the walls and the electrician who wired the outlets. I laid the reclaimed hardwood floors in my study myself, feeling the solid, unyielding strength of them under my knees. When it was finished, it was more than a house. It was a monument to 13 years of discipline and sacrifice. It was the physical manifestation of my independence and hard work. It was registered solely under my name, paid for in full with money I had earned long before I had even considered sharing my life with anyone. It was mine, my fortress, my sanctuary, the one place on earth that was completely and utterly under my control. Or so I had foolishly believed. I met Clara 2 years after I moved into the house. She was a whirlwind of life and laughter, and she came with something I'd secretly always envied. A big, loud, seemingly close-knit family. Her parents, Eleanor and Richard, were always hosting barbecues and holiday dinners. Her brother, Leo, was the charming, life-of-the-party type who could always make you laugh. At first, it was intoxicating. I'd spent my life as an outsider peering in, and they threw the door wide open for me. I thought I had found the missing piece of my life. We got married a year later, a beautiful ceremony in the backyard under the old oak tree. I was genuinely happy, and in my happiness I was generous. When the whole family went out for dinner, I'd insist on picking up the tab. When Eleanor admired a piece of jewelry in a shop window, I'd make a note and buy it for her birthday. I was proud to be able to provide, to share the fruits of my hard-won success. But slowly, Like a subtle shift in the foundation of a house that heralds a deeper problem, I started to notice the cracks. The entire family structure, I began to realize, was warped. It orbited entirely around one person, Leo. He was 34, 2 years younger than me, but was treated like a perpetual, charmingly irresponsible teenager. He drifted from one brilliant business idea to another, never holding a real job for more than a few months. Yet, in his parents' eyes, he was a misunderstood genius on the cusp of greatness. He was the golden child. The dynamic became painfully clear one Thanksgiving. I'd spent a small fortune on high-end groceries and a special bottle of aged wine to impress everyone. As I was uncorking the wine, Eleanor watched me with a tight smile. "That must have cost a pretty penny, Owen," she said, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a shame. That kind of money could have finally fixed the transmission on poor Leo's car. He has to take the bus everywhere now, you know?" The table went quiet. I just stood there, corkscrew in hand, feeling about 2 inches tall. Clara quickly jumped in to smooth things over, laughing it off as Mom's terrible sense of humor. But the barb had landed. My gesture of generosity had been publicly reframed as an act of selfish indulgence. This became a pattern. If I mentioned a successful project at work, Eleanor would smile politely and then immediately pivot. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you hear? Leo is thinking of becoming a travel blogger. He has such a way with words." The fact that Leo's only travel was to his parents' house for a free meal didn't seem to matter. The financial help started to feel less like a gift and more like a tax. Clara was the intermediary, the one who would approach me with a softened request. "Honey, Leo's a little short on his phone bill this month." Or, "Mom was hoping we could help with their property taxes this year." I always said yes. I wanted to be a good husband, a good son-in-law. I didn't realize I was just funding their system of enablement. The house, my house, was a frequent topic of conversation. "This place is just wonderful, Owen," Eleanor would say, gesturing around my spacious living room with a proprietary air. "It's a little big for just 2 people, don't you think? So many empty rooms just collecting dust." At the time, I brushed it off as idle chatter. A harmless observation from an older woman. I didn't recognize it for what it was. A seed of entitlement being planted. They weren't just admiring my home. They were assessing its potential as a family asset. They were looking at my sanctuary and seeing spare real estate. And Clara, my wife, the woman who was supposed to be my partner in building our life, just stood there and smiled, never once saying, "It's our home, Mom. It's perfect for us." That silence, I would later realize, was the most damning betrayal of all. The tipping point, the moment the hairline cracks in our foundation began to splinter, came about 3 months before the break-in. Leo had been dramatically fired from his latest job, a sales position he'd held for a record-breaking 4 months, for creative differences, which I later learned meant he'd been caught using the company credit card for personal expenses. The family drama kicked into high gear. The phone calls between Clara and her mother became constant, hushed, urgent conversations in the other room that would abruptly stop the moment I walked in. I knew something was coming. I could feel it in the air, a gathering storm of expectation. One Saturday morning, Clara came into my home office. I was at my drafting table, sketching out some initial ideas for the Sterling project, feeling the familiar calm and focus that my work always brought me. She sat on the edge of my desk, twisting a strand of her hair, a nervous habit I knew meant she was about to ask for something she knew I wouldn't like. "Honey," she began, with that overly sweet tone she used when she was trying to manage me. "We need to talk about Leo." I put my pencil down, my stomach tightening. "Okay, what's he done now?" "He's just in a really tough spot," she said, her eyes wide and pleading. "It wasn't his fault. His boss was a nightmare. Anyway, Mom and I were talking, and we have all this space here. 2 beautiful, empty bedrooms just collecting dust." The cold dread I'd felt creeping up my spine for months finally washed over me. "Clara, no. Just for a little while," she insisted, her voice instantly rising, the sweetness evaporating. "Just until he gets back on his feet. He and Chloe are getting evicted. We can't let them be homeless, can we?" What would people think? Their family. What people think is not my concern, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. My concern is our home. This is our quiet space, Clara. It's not a halfway house for your 34-year-old brother who refuses to grow up. Her face hardened. The pleading vanished, replaced by an expression I was starting to see more and more often. It was a look of sharp, defensive loyalty, not to me but to them. You're being selfish, Owen. I can't believe how cold and selfish you're being. This is what family does. We help each other. I thought you understood that when you married me. Or do you think you and your big, fancy house are just too good for my family? Too good. I shot back, standing up from my chair. The accusation stung. I have done nothing but help your family. Who paid for their last 2 months of rent so they wouldn't be evicted then? Who paid off Leo's credit card debt last year after his online business failed? This isn't about helping, Clara. This is about them moving in. And the answer is no. It's a boundary. This home is our sanctuary. You're making me choose between you and my brother, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. No, Clara, I said, my voice tired. You've already chosen. You just don't want to admit it. The argument ended in a stony, resentful silence that lasted for days. A few days later, after hearing about a couple of burglaries in the next neighborhood over, I made a decision. On the surface, it felt like a practical measure. But deep down, it was something more. It was an act of quiet defiance. It was me fortifying my walls. I called a top-rated security company and had them install a full, state-of-the-art system. Sensors on every door and window, and 5 high-definition cameras covering all points of entry and the main living areas. I didn't tell Clara. I told myself it was because I didn't want to alarm her or start another fight about the cost. But the real, unspoken reason? I felt, on some primal level, that the biggest threat to my sanctuary wasn't just coming from outside the walls. It was already inside. The drive home from Mr. Sterling's office was a 15-minute eternity. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were bone white. My mind was a chaotic storm of images from the security feed, playing on a loop. Leo's smug, entitled face, the ugly cardboard boxes, the flashing police lights painting my home in shades of violation. It didn't feel real. It was the kind of absurd, dramatic story you hear about on a daytime TV show. Not something that happens to you on a gray Tuesday afternoon while you're trying to land the biggest deal of your life. I had to get answers. I stabbed at my car's touchscreen and called Clara. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Hey, honey, is your meeting over already? How did it go? Her voice was preternaturally light, breezy, and cheerful. The forced normalcy of it was like nails on a chalkboard to my frayed nerves. It made my stomach turn. Clara? I said, my voice flat and cold, devoid of any emotion. Why are the police at our house? There was a pause. It wasn't a long one, but it was just long enough for me to hear the gears of a lie grinding into place. The police? What are you talking about? That's crazy. I'm just out running errands at the mall. Stop it. Just stop lying to me. I snapped, my control finally breaking, the words sharp as glass. I got an alert from the security system, the one I had installed 2 weeks ago. I saw them, Clara. I saw Leo and Chloe in our living room with moving boxes. I saw the alarm going off. I saw everything. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Why are the police at my house? The silence was much longer this time, thick with guilt. When she finally spoke, the cheerful act was gone, replaced by a defensive, long-suffering sigh. Oh, fine. I was going to tell you tonight, Owen. Honestly, it all just happened so fast. I didn't have a chance. What happened fast? I demanded, turning onto my street with a screech of tires. I could see the patrol car still parked in my driveway, an alien presence in my peaceful neighborhood. Well, Leo and Chloe got their final eviction notice yesterday, she said, the words tumbling out in a practiced rush of excuses. And Mom was just a complete wreck, beside herself with worry, and I was upset, and they literally had nowhere else to go tonight. So Mom and I decided it would be for the best if they just moved into the guest room for a few months. It's no big deal, honey. We have the space. It's the right thing to do. I was speechless. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The way she said, "Mom and I decided." As if I were a subordinate in my own life, a junior partner whose vote was irrelevant. As if I was a guest in my own home, and the real owners had made an executive decision. You and your mother decided? I finally managed to say, the words feeling like shards of ice in my mouth. You made a decision about my house, the house I bought and paid for, without even the courtesy of a phone call? I knew you'd overreact, she said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch, instantly casting herself as the victim. You always get so weird and territorial when it comes to my family. It's just temporary. Owen, is what family does. They support each other. Before I could respond, my other line buzzed. It was an unknown number. I told Clara, "Don't move," and switched over, my heart pounding. "Is this Owen?" A sharp, imperious older woman's voice demanded. "Yes. Who is this?" "It's Eleanor," she said, her tone dripping with accusation, as if I was an idiot for not recognizing the number of the woman who had just orchestrated the hostile takeover of my life. My mother-in-law. What on earth do you think you're doing? I just got a frantic, hysterical call from Leo. He said you called the police on him. On your own family. How could you do something so cruel, so vulgar? You're embarrassing all of us in front of the entire neighborhood. There was no concern, no question about what might have happened. Just immediate, visceral condemnation. I was the villain. I was the one who had transgressed. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered and complete, it felt like a physical blow. My wife had given away my home, and her mother was scolding me for daring to report the break-in. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine. The world went silent except for the furious ringing in my ears. I looked at the house I had built, my sanctuary, now a crime scene cordoned off by my own family's treachery, and I realized with chilling clarity, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a coup, and my wife was one of the conspirators. I got out of the car on shaky legs, my mind still reeling from the 1-2 punch of betrayal from my wife and her mother. 2 police officers were standing on my porch with Leo and Chloe. One of the officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a calm, no-nonsense demeanor, approached me as I walked up the path. His name tag read Miller. "Are you the homeowner, sir?" he asked, his voice steady and professional. "Yes, I am. Owen Harrison," I said, my own voice sounding raspy and distant. He nodded. "These individuals are claiming you gave them permission to move in. They used a key to enter the property, which is what triggered the alarm." Leo immediately stepped forward, puffing out his chest in a display of wounded pride. His face was a mask of indignant rage. "He's my brother-in-law. His wife, my sister, said it was fine. She gave us the key this morning." Officer Miller's eyes flickered to me, a silent question. "Is your wife on the deed to this house, Mr. Harrison?" he asked, ignoring Leo's outburst completely. "No," I said, my gaze locking onto Leo's. "She is not. The house is solely mine, purchased with my own funds 13 years before our marriage. And I did not give anyone permission to enter it today, let alone move their belongings in." Chloe, on cue, started to cry. It wasn't loud sobbing, but a quiet, theatrical whimper designed for maximum effect. Leo immediately put a protective arm around her, glaring at me as if I had just struck her. "So this is who you are, Owen? You'd really throw your own family out on the street? You're a monster." Officer Miller held up a hand, cutting him off. "This is a simple matter, folks. We have a homeowner stating that you are trespassing on his private property. You need to remove your belongings from the porch and vacate the premises immediately. It's not a debate." The argument that followed was short but spectacularly ugly. Leo lost it completely. He called me every name in the book, his voice rising in volume until it was practically a shriek. He accused me of being a heartless, arrogant millionaire, which was laughable. I was comfortable, not a millionaire who didn't understand the meaning of the word family. The whole time, I just stood there, silent and cold, letting his tirade wash over me. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet old lady who was usually out watering her roses at this time of day, was now watching the whole sordid soap opera from behind her living room curtains. Eleanor's words about embarrassing the family echoed in my head. They had brought this circus to my doorstep, not me. Eventually, with the officers watching impassively, they loaded their pathetic collection of boxes and cheap furniture back into their beat-up van and sped off. Leo, for his final act, leaned out the window and shouted one last, particularly vile obscenity at me before they rounded the corner. I thought that was the end of it for the night. I was exhausted, violated, and just wanted to lock my door and be alone. I was wrong. About an hour later, after I had thanked the officers profusely and was standing alone in my now silent, but deeply violated, living room, my phone rang. It was Leo. I almost didn't answer, but some morbid curiosity, a desire to see how much deeper this rabbit hole of insanity went, made me press the accept button. You, he spat, the word dripping with venom. No hello, no preamble. You think you're so big, sitting in your perfect little house. You think you're so much better than us. What do you want, Leo? I asked, my voice weary beyond words. What do I want? He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound that grated on my ears. I want what I'm owed. I want compensation. There's a college fund I need to start for my future kids, and you just set us back. I want payment for the public humiliation and the severe emotional distress you caused my pregnant wife today. Pregnant? That was a new one. You sicked the cops on us. You made a scene in front of the whole neighborhood. I was literally speechless. The nerve, the unmitigated gall of this man. You broke into my house, and you think I owe you something? You do, he yelled, his voice cracking with a frantic rage. I want $15,000. Cash. You're a rich architect, that's nothing to you. It's the least you can do after what you put us through. You pay me that, and I'll consider not telling Clara's divorce lawyer all about your anger issues and what a cruel, unstable man you are. It'll make the custody battle for the house much cleaner. The mention of the words lawyer, divorce, and custody in one neat, threatening package hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a random, angry outburst. It was a premeditated threat. A strategy. They had already planned the next move. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a shakedown. And in that precise moment, any last, lingering shred of familial obligation I felt towards him, or any of them, turned to ash. Goodbye, Leo, I said calmly, and hung up the phone. Clara came home an hour after Leo's chilling call. I was in the kitchen, methodically cleaning the countertops, wiping away imaginary dirt, just to have something to do with my hands. The silence in the house was a living thing, thick and suffocating. She walked in and dropped her purse on the counter, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the tense quiet. She tried to act normal, but her eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. She had clearly been crying, or more likely, she'd been on the phone getting her marching orders from her mother. What a crazy day, she said, forcing a small, brittle laugh. My phone has been blowing up. My mom is a complete wreck. Leo is... Well, he's Leo. I didn't say anything. I just stopped wiping and stared at her, letting the silence stretch. I wanted to see what she would do, what she would say, without me prompting her. Look, Owen, she finally said, her voice softening, adopting the pleading tone she used when she wanted to smooth things over and get her way. I know you're mad. I really do get it. I should have talked to you first. I admit that, but you have to try to see it from my perspective. They're my family, my blood. I couldn't just let them end up on the street. They weren't going to end up on the street, Clara, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. All the anger burned away, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. They have parents. What they wanted was a free ride in a big house, and you were more than happy to be their ticket. With my house. It's our house, she insisted, her voice rising, her default defense. We're married. The whole what's mine is yours thing? Does that mean nothing to you? It means something when it's a partnership built on trust and respect, I retorted, my own voice finally gaining volume. It means nothing when it's a hostile takeover. You and your mother made a unilateral decision about my most significant personal and financial asset behind my back. You gave your brother a key to my home. Do you have any idea how much of a violation that is? How profoundly unsafe you have made me feel in the one place I am supposed to feel safe. You're being so dramatic. It's just a house. That was it. That was the line. The final, unforgivable sin. Just a house. I repeated, my voice dropping to a whisper of disbelief. I looked around the open-plan room at the custom cabinets I'd designed, the window overlooking the ancient oak tree I'd built the entire structure around. This is not just a house. This is 13 years of my life condensed into wood and glass. It's my security, my peace, my proudest accomplishment. And you just gave it away like it was a spare coat. To a man who then, less than an hour ago, tried to extort me for $15,000. Her face went white. She looked genuinely shocked. He what? Oh, you didn't know that part of the plan? I said with a bitter, humorless laugh. Yes. He called and demanded money for his emotional distress. He even had the foresight to mention your future divorce lawyer and a custody battle for the house. It was quite a performance. She just stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing silently. For the first time, she looked like she understood the true gravity of what she had unleashed. But it was far, far too late. The trust wasn't just broken. It had been systematically dismantled and sold for parts. I can't do this anymore, Clara, I said. The fight was gone from my voice, replaced by a profound, chilling emptiness. This isn't a marriage. It's me versus you and your family. And I'm done playing. I'm done being the bank. I'm done being the villain. I'm just done. That night, I took a spare set of blankets and pillows from the linen closet. I walked past our master bedroom, where she was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall, and went into one of the empty guest rooms, one of the rooms she had so generously offered to her brother. I closed the door, and for the first time in our marriage, I turned the lock. The boundary had been obliterated, and I was finally, definitively rebuilding it. And she was on the other side. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I was rested, but because sleep offered no escape. The house was oppressively silent, but my mind was a hive of activity. The raw anger and shock of the previous day had cooled overnight into something else. A cold, hard, strategic resolve. They had declared war on me. I was going to finish it, but I was going to do it intelligently. My first call at 7 a.m. sharp was to my best friend from college, Marcus. He wasn't just my friend. He was one of the sharpest, most ruthless real estate and family law attorneys in the state. I didn't want to just dump this on him over the phone. Marcus, it's Owen. I'm in trouble. Can I buy you breakfast? Your choice. From the sound of your voice, I'll clear my morning, he said. Meet me at the Daily Grind in 30. We sat in a quiet booth in the back of the cafe. Over coffee, I laid out the entire story for him, starting with the subtle manipulations and financial drains over the years, and ending with the break-in, the police report, and Leo's extortion attempt. I left nothing out. He listened intently, his expression growing more grim with every detail. When I finished, he put his coffee cup down and stared at me. Wow, he finally said. Just wow. Owen, you need to stop seeing this as a messy family problem. This is a legal problem. Coordinated effort. They trespassed. He attempted to extort you. And your wife was a willing accomplice to both. So what do? I asked, feeling a sliver of hope for the first time in 24 hours. You stop playing defense and you start playing chess, Marcus said, his voice all business. He pulled a pen from his jacket and started scribbling on a napkin. First, the no-contact rule. Effective immediately. You do not talk to them. Not to Clara, not to her mother, not to Leo. They approach you, you say 2 words. Talk to my lawyer. That's me now. Any communication, no matter how small, is a potential trap. He slid the napkin across the table. Second, documentation. You are going to create a file. Save that video footage from the security system in 3 different places. The cloud, a hard drive, and a copy you're going to give to me. Write down a detailed timeline of every significant event you can remember, especially financial ones. Every time you paid their rent, every loan that was never repaid. Dates, times, what was said. We paint a picture of a long-term pattern of financial exploitation. I have the video, I said. It's crystal clear. Good, he said. That's your queen on the chessboard. Now the main event, the house. You bought it before the marriage with your own premarital funds. The deed is only in your name. That's your castle. In this state, that makes it separate property. Legally, it's yours. But that won't stop them from trying to make a claim on it in a divorce. This is where they'll fight you. His words were a splash of cold water. Divorce. He said it so matter-of-factly. It wasn't a question of if, but when. They'll argue that marital funds were used for upkeep or property taxes, Marcus explained. They'll claim its value increased because of her non-financial contributions as a homemaker. Her lawyer will try to muddy the waters to make it look like a shared asset. It gets messy and expensive. That's why your documentation is key. So I need to prepare for a fight. You need to prepare for World War III, he corrected me. Eleanor sounds like a master manipulator. She's not going to let a multi-million-dollar asset slip through her fingers without a battle. She will paint you as an abusive, controlling monster to the court. She'll have Clara claim you were hiding assets. The sheer viciousness of it made me feel sick. But we have the recording, Marcus said, leaning in. The extortion attempt. And we're going to get more. From this moment on, I want you to assume you are always being listened to. But we can use that. We're going to let them think they can bully you into a settlement. We let them get arrogant, and they will make a mistake. After we left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had a plan. I had an ally. I spent the rest of the day in a state of focused activity. I went to the police station and spoke with Officer Miller again. I formally filed a trespassing complaint against Leo and Chloe, and I also filed a report regarding Leo's phone call, officially documenting the extortion attempt. I gave the officer a copy of the security footage, which he watched with a grim, tight-lipped expression. You did the right thing, Mr. Harrison, he said. This is all very clear-cut. When I got home, Clara was there. She had been crying. She tried to apologize again, to talk about marriage counseling, to promise she would set boundaries with her family. But her words felt hollow, a desperate, last-ditch effort to pull me back into the fold. I saw her not as my wife, but as a hostile party, an agent of her family's interests. Clara, I met with a lawyer this morning, I said calmly, handing her Marcus's card. From now on, all communication needs to go through him. The look of shock and utter betrayal on her face was almost comical. A lawyer? You're getting a lawyer involved against your own wife. You and your family involved the police and an extortion plot, I replied, my voice devoid of heat. I think we're past the point of solving this over dinner. That night, I did one last thing. I went online and ordered 3 more security cameras. Small, discreet ones, easily hidden among books and decorations. And this time, I made sure they had high-fidelity audio recording capabilities. I had a feeling the next family meeting was going to be one for the record books, and I wanted to be sure I captured every single incriminating word. I was no longer just defending my home. I was gathering intelligence for the battle to secure my future. A week passed in a state of brittle, unspoken Cold War. I lived in the guest room. Clara lived in the master bedroom. We were 2 strangers sharing a mortgage-free roof. The silence between us thick with unspoken accusations and legal strategy. Her family, predictably, was bombarding her with calls and texts, which she would then try to relay to me in pleading, tearful ambushes in the kitchen. My mom just wants to talk. Owen. She thinks this has all been a huge misunderstanding. I stuck to Marcus's script. Tell her to call my lawyer. The shock on her face each time I said it was oddly satisfying. They were used to emotional manipulation, not procedural stonewalling. They didn't know how to react. I knew this couldn't go on. I needed a final, public confrontation to sever the ties for good, and to get the evidence Marcus said we needed. So, with my lawyer's guidance, I laid a trap. The new audio-enabled cameras were now in place. one discreetly placed on a bookshelf, another tucked into a decorative plant near the TV, and a third on the mantel. They were invisible, but they were listening. I approached Clara on a Thursday evening. "I've been thinking," I said, my tone carefully neutral. "This silence isn't helping anyone. I'm willing to have one last conversation. A family meeting. Let's get everyone in the same room and see if there is any way to move forward. I'll host it here on Saturday afternoon. I want to hear everyone out." Her eyes lit up with a desperate, triumphant hope. She saw it as a sign of my weakness, a sign that the pressure was working and I was ready to cave. She saw a chance to reel me back in. "Oh, Owen, thank you," she said, rushing forward to hug me. I stiffened, and she awkwardly pulled back. "I'll call my mom right now. This is the right thing to do. You'll see." I could practically hear the triumphant phone calls happening all over town. "He's cracking. We've got him." On Saturday, they arrived exactly at 2 p.m., a united front of entitlement. Eleanor, Richard, Leo, and Chloe. And of course, Clara, who was now playing the role of hopeful peacemaker. They walked into my living room, the scene of the original crime, and arranged themselves on my couches as if they were a tribunal and I was the one on trial. The air was thick with their smug certainty. I remained standing, leaning against the fireplace mantel, keeping a physical and emotional distance. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice calm and even. Eleanor, as the matriarch, took charge immediately. She gave me a look that was a masterclass in condescending pity. "Owen, I'm glad you've finally come to your senses," she began, her tone dripping with false magnanimity. "We are all very, very hurt by your actions. Calling the police, involving lawyers. It's just not how a family behaves. It's terribly common." Leo, sitting beside her, puffed out his chest, fully recovered from his earlier humiliation. "We're willing to forgive you," he said, as if bestowing upon me a great and noble honor, "if you agree to a few reasonable conditions. First, a formal, written apology to me and Chloe. Second, you'll drop the ridiculous and slanderous trespassing complaint. And third, you'll give us that $15,000. Not for damages anymore. We'll call it a college fund. A gesture of goodwill to get our new life started. It's the least you can do after the trauma you've caused." I listened, my expression a perfect blank slate. I let them all talk. I let Richard, the quiet, spineless father, pipe in about the importance of keeping the peace and not rocking the boat. I let Chloe dab at her dry eyes and talk about the stress being bad for the baby she was supposedly carrying. I let Clara plead with me to be the bigger person and think about our future. They were so arrogant, so utterly convinced of their moral high ground, that they didn't notice how eerily calm I was. They mistook my silence for submission. They thought they were winning. As they were winding down, having laid out all their demands, there was a polite knock at the front door. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice perfectly level. I walked to the door, feeling 5 pairs of eyes on my back. I opened it to find Mr. Sterling standing on my porch, dressed in casual but expensive weekend attire. "Owen, my apologies for dropping by unannounced on a weekend," he said, his voice warm and respectful. "But I was in the neighborhood, and I couldn't stop thinking about that atrium design. I had a flash of inspiration I wanted to run by you while it was fresh." "Mr. Sterling, it's no problem at all," I said, opening the door wider. "Please come in. You've just caught me in the middle of a family discussion." He stepped inside, a picture of old-money elegance and quiet, unassailable authority. The entire Harrison clan fell silent, their jaws practically on the floor. They all knew who he was. I'd pointed him out at a charity gala once. His presence, so unexpected and so powerful, completely shattered the dynamic in the room. He was a high-status witness, an impartial observer to their shabby little kangaroo court. The trap was now perfectly set, and the bait was about to be taken. Mr. Sterling, ever the gentleman and acutely aware of social dynamics, seemed to sense the thick, hostile tension in the room. "Perhaps I've come at a bad time," he said, his sharp eyes taking in the hostile faces staring at him. "Not at all," I said calmly, gesturing to the armchair Leo had so arrogantly occupied during the break-in. In fact, you've arrived at the perfect moment. Please have a seat. You're about to witness the resolution. He raised a curious eyebrow but sat down, crossing his legs. His presence had a chilling effect on them. They looked at each other, confused and unnerved. Their home field advantage had just vanished. Eleanor, recovering first, tried to regain control, to play the part of the gracious matriarch for Mr. Sterling. Well, as we were just explaining to Owen, she said, her voice now syrupy sweet. This is simply about what's best for the family. Clara is his wife, after all. This beautiful home. Well, a home is meant to be the heart of a family. A legacy. It's only right that we all look out for each other and make sure our children have a strong foundation. She smiled a tight, self-satisfied smile, delivering what she thought was her final, unassailable, family values closing argument. That was the line. The perfect, poetic cue I was waiting for. A legacy for the family, Eleanor? I asked, my voice deceptively soft. A foundation for the children? Are you sure about that? I reached for my tablet on the coffee table. 5 pairs of eyes followed my every move. I tapped the screen once, then again to select a file. A moment of pregnant silence, and then a voice filled the room. It was Eleanor's voice, crisp and clear, captured in high-fidelity audio by the camera on the bookshelf. He'll get over it, Clara, the recording of Eleanor said. It was from a phone call she'd made to Clara 2 days ago, a call she'd taken right here in the living room, thinking she was alone. Men like him are predictable. They make a big fuss, they puff out their chests, but they're terrified of divorce. The cost, the embarrassment. You just have to be firm. Leo and Chloe will move in. Slowly, carefully, we make this house ours. We get your name on the deed as part of a new will or a postnup. He thinks it's his inheritance to give, but it's your right. What's his is yours. In a few years, after the promotion I'm sure he'll get, we can push him for a full buyout. He'll be out of the picture, and the house will finally belong to this family, the way it should be. The room went absolutely deathly still. The only sound was the recording, which I mercilessly let play on. Clara's voice came next, weak and complicit. But Mom, he paid for all of it himself, before we even met. And then Eleanor's voice, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. He owed you that. Think of it as back pay for marrying down. It's the price he pays to have someone like you. Just play the part of the loving, supportive wife. We'll handle the rest. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was a physical thing. A heavy blanket of humiliation that smothered every person on that couch. I looked at each of them one by one. Leo's smug expression had melted into a slack-jawed horror. Richard looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole, his face a pasty white. Clara was sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking, but my eyes were fixed on Eleanor. Her face was ashen gray. The mask of the caring, sophisticated matriarch had been ripped away, exposing the greedy, manipulative, classist schemer underneath. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just a dry, clicking sound. Mr. Sterling slowly stood up. He didn't look at me. He looked at them, a slow pan of pure, unadulterated disgust on his patrician face. He looked at Eleanor as if she were something he had found on the bottom of his shoe. Then his eyes met mine, and they held a new, profound level of respect. "Owen," he said, his voice firm and clear in the silent room. "Call my office on Monday morning. We'll sign the contract. You're a man who knows how to protect his foundation." He gave me a sharp, definitive nod and walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. His silent verdict was more damning than any shout could have been. I turned back to the smoldering wreckage of my wife's family. "This meeting is over," I said, my voice resonating with a calm, absolute power they had never heard from me before. "I will be filing for divorce on Monday morning. I want all of you out of my house. Now." They didn't argue. They didn't protest. For the first time in their lives, they had absolutely nothing to say. This was the moment everything changed. the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you've journeyed with me this far. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of my journey. Watching them leave was like watching a defeated army in a silent, humiliating retreat. There was no shouting, no final volley of insults. Just a heavy, thick silence charged with the static of their complete and utter exposure. Richard, his face a mottled red, had to physically help Eleanor to her feet, as if the shock had stolen the strength from her legs. Leo wouldn't look at me. His golden child bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by the sullen, downcast look of a child who had been truly and publicly caught. Chloe followed him, her head bowed. Clara was the last one to leave. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her body racked with sobs. Owen, I never meant for. Save it, Clara, I said. My voice wasn't angry anymore, just tired, exhausted, but it held a note of absolute finality. There's nothing left to say. You made your choice a long time ago. I'll have my lawyer send your lawyer the papers. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. She looked at me one last time, her eyes pleading for a lifeline I was no longer willing to throw. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door on our marriage and on the life I thought we were building. The moment the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for days, for weeks, vanished. It left a profound, cavernous emptiness in its wake. I stood in the middle of my living room, my sanctuary, and it felt like a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. The silence was overwhelming. I had won. I had protected my foundation. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt quiet and terribly, terribly lonely. The first thing I did was call a 24-hour locksmith. I need every external lock on my house changed. Right now, I told him, my voice flat. He was there within the hour. The shrill sound of the drill, of the old tumblers being removed and replaced with new, unfamiliar ones, was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my security being physically, irrevocably restored. My second call was to Marcus. It's done, I said. The recording worked better than I could have possibly imagined. I could hear the smile in his voice. I never doubted it for a second. Arrogance is a hell of a truth serum. The divorce papers will be filed first thing Monday morning. With that recording as evidence of conspiracy and malicious intent, they don't have a legal leg to stand on. Any claim on the house, any demand for alimony, it's all dead on arrival. This premeditated fraud, Owen, you're in the clear. The next few days were a blur of methodical, joyless practicalities. I went through the house, room by room, and began to pack up all of Clara's belongings. Every dress in the closet, every picture frame on the nightstand, every half-used bottle of perfume in the bathroom. It was a strange, painful process, like excavating the ruins of a life that was no longer mine. As I was clearing out her desk drawer, I found a small, worn photograph tucked in the back. It was from our honeymoon, a selfie we'd taken on a beach. We were both smiling, sun-kissed, impossibly young and happy. A genuine, unguarded happiness. Seeing it hit me harder than the anger or the betrayal. It was a glimpse of what was real, or what I had believed to be real, before the rot had set in. A wave of profound grief washed over me. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, the photo in my hand, and I finally let myself feel the loss. The loss of the woman I thought I had married. The loss of the future I thought we would have. I mourned for that smiling man in the picture who had no idea what was coming. After a few minutes, I placed the photo gently on top of the other things in the box, closed the flaps, and sealed it with tape. That part of my life was over. I stacked all 32 boxes neatly in the garage and had Marcus arrange for her brother. Not her, I couldn't bear to see her, to pick them up at a time when I wouldn't be home. I didn't want one last, tearful confrontation. I wanted a clean break. A week later, I got one final phone call from her. I had blocked her number, but she called from a friend's phone. I answered, not knowing who it was. Owen, please, just talk to me. She sobbed, her voice thick and broken. Don't do this. We can fix this. I swear I'll go to therapy. I'll cut them off completely, whatever you want. I love you. I listened to her pleas, and for a moment, a flicker of the man I used to be, the man who loved the woman in that photograph, felt a pang of deep, aching sadness. But then I remembered the cold, calculating words on that recording. Think of it as back pay for marrying down. I remembered the smug look on her brother's face as he sat in my chair. I remembered the absolute, fundamental disrespect for me, for my work, for everything I had built. Clara, I said, and my voice was calm and steady. The voice of a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. The issue was never just about your family's behavior. It was about your silence, your complicity. You stood by and let it all happen. You chose them over me, over us, at every single opportunity. You saw this house, my life's work, as nothing more than a resource for your family to plunder. That's not something therapy can fix. The trust is dead, Clara. There's nothing left to build on. So that's it, she whispered. After everything? That's it, I confirmed. I've established my boundary. This is my home, and people who try to take it from me, or enable those who do, are not welcome in my life. Goodbye, Clara. I hung up the phone and then I blocked that number, too. It was the last time we ever spoke. The war was officially over. The long, slow, and lonely process of rebuilding could finally begin. The 6 months that followed the final phone call were a quiet, surreal revelation. The divorce was finalized with a speed that shocked even Marcus. As he had predicted, once her lawyer was presented with the audio recording and the police report for the extortion attempt, any talk of contesting the house as separate property or demanding a large alimony settlement vanished completely. They settled quickly and quietly, desperate to avoid the recording being played in open court. The house, my sanctuary, was legally and unequivocally mine, free and clear of any claim, past, present, or future. But untangling a life is more than just signing legal papers. The house was clean and secure, but my mind was cluttered with the emotional debris of the betrayal. The silence, which had at first been a profound relief, started to feel heavy, oppressive. Every room held a memory, a ghost of a life I had once lived. And not all of them were bad, which was almost harder. The good memories were poisoned now, tainted by the knowledge of the deception that lay beneath them. On Marcus's persistent recommendation, I started seeing a therapist, a sharp and insightful woman named Dr. Sharma. You're experiencing a complex form of grief, Owen, she told me in our first session. Her office a calm, neutral space that felt miles away from my own home. You're not just mourning the end of a marriage. You're mourning the idea of the family you thought you had, and more importantly, the person you thought your wife was. You're grieving a phantom. She was right. I had spent so much energy being angry and strategic that I hadn't allowed myself to truly feel the depth of the loss. Dr. Sharma helped me work through it. In one session, she asked me a simple question that hit me like a thunderbolt. When Clara's family would make their comments, what were you most afraid of? I thought for a moment and answered, losing her. I thought if I pushed back, she would leave. Dr. Sharma looked at me kindly. And when you finally did push back, she proved you right. Your fear was justified. So why does that feel like a failure? It was a breakthrough. I realized I hadn't failed to keep her. I had succeeded in finally confirming the truth. Work became my refuge. Freed from the constant background hum of family drama and the emotional drain of my toxic marriage, my focus and creativity soared. The project with Mr. Sterling was a massive success. My design for the hotel wing won a prestigious industry award, and my firm, recognizing both the success and my renewed dedication, offered me a major promotion. I was made a junior partner, in charge of all new large-scale commercial designs. My salary nearly doubled overnight. It was a bitter irony. The event that had started in a moment of career-threatening panic had ended up launching my career into the stratosphere. Slowly, methodically, I began to reclaim my house not just as a property but as a home. I converted one of the spare bedrooms, the one Leo had mentally labeled master guest, into a personal gym, a place where I could sweat out the lingering anger and frustration. I turned the other guest room into a library and studio, filling the shelves with books on art and architecture, setting up my old drafting table by the window. I started working in the garden again, pulling weeds and planting new life where there had been neglect. The house started to feel like mine again, reflecting my passions, my peace, my future. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had drifted away during my marriage because, as one of them later admitted, "Dude, we just couldn't stand being around her family. We'd have barbecues in the backyard." The space filled with easy, genuine laughter instead of coded, passive-aggressive comments. My home was no longer a stage for someone else's drama. It was a place of healing. I was rebuilding not just the life within the walls, but the man who lived there. You can't completely wall yourself off from the world, and news, especially bad news, has a way of trickling through even the most well-constructed boundaries. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Daniel, a guy I knew from my old social circle, at a coffee shop. He looked awkward when he saw me, that telltale sign that he was bursting with gossip he wasn't sure he should share. After a few minutes of strained small talk, the dam broke. "Man, I don't know if you care," he started, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "but I hear things are a complete and total mess with the Harrison family." He told me that my final stand, and the subsequent severing of their primary income stream, had caused a cataclysmic implosion. With me no longer in the picture as their personal ATM and emergency bailout fund, the family's fragile house of cards had collapsed. Leo, it turned out, hadn't just been unemployed and entitled. He was a compulsive gambler, deep in debt to some very unsavory people. The $15,000 he had demanded from me wasn't for a college fund or emotional distress. It was to pay off a loan shark who was threatening to break his legs. It turned out the pregnancy was a lie, a desperate gambit for sympathy and cash. Without my money, he'd defaulted. The story got ugly, involving threats, a car being mysteriously set on fire, and the police getting involved again. This time with Leo as the prime suspect in an insurance fraud scheme. To hide from his creditors and the police, Leo and Chloe had been forced to move in with Eleanor and Richard after all. The grand dream of living in my spacious, custom-built home had been replaced by the grim reality of 4 miserable adults living on top of each other in a cramped, 2-bedroom suburban house. Daniel said it was a pressure cooker of resentment and blame, and Eleanor was losing her mind trying to manage her failure of a son while keeping up appearances with the neighbors. Clara, he said, had moved to another state to live with an aunt, too humiliated to stay in town. I listened to all of this with a strange sense of clinical detachment. It wasn't joy, it wasn't pity, it wasn't even schadenfreude. It was just information. It was like reading a case study about a dysfunctional system that had finally, predictably, collapsed under the weight of its own toxicity. Their chaos was no longer my chaos. It was just a story about people I used to know a long time ago. Then, about a year after the divorce, a letter arrived. It was a pale lavender envelope, and I recognized Eleanor's elegant, spidery handwriting immediately. My first instinct was to throw it directly into the shredder. But curiosity, a final nagging thread to the past, got the better of me. I opened it. The letter was a 4-page masterpiece of narcissistic delusion. Not once did it contain the words, "I'm sorry." Instead, it was a long, rambling justification of her actions, painting herself as a misunderstood, fiercely protective mother. She wrote about how Clara had been set to marry another man before she met me, a man from a wealthy family with good social standing. She implied that I had stolen Clara away, and that my middle-class background and my refusal to properly integrate into their family was a constant source of disappointment. Then came the final, unbelievable paragraphs. She wrote that everything she had done was to secure the future that Clara deserved, a future that should have included a substantial inheritance and family property. She was, in her mind, trying to fix the mistake her daughter had made in marrying me. And then the kicker, the line that confirmed everything. "It has been a difficult year for all of us," she wrote, "but I am a forgiving person, and I believe in the sanctity of family." I have decided to forgive you for the pain and division you have caused. I am willing to allow you to re-enter our family. Clara is miserable without you. All you have to do is show some remorse for your actions, and we can begin to put this unfortunate chapter behind us." I read that last line twice, then a third time, and then I started to laugh. A deep, genuine, liberating laugh that echoed through my quiet, peaceful house. The arrogance, the absolute, bottomless lack of self-awareness. It was certifiably insane. She was the arsonist, standing ankle-deep in the ashes of the world she had burned down, magnanimously offering to forgive the fire alarm for having the audacity to ring. It was the final, perfect confirmation that I had made the only decision I could have possibly made. She hadn't learned a thing, and she had just given me my final, welcome release. I took Eleanor's lavender-scented letter, folded it neatly, walked out into my backyard, and dropped it into the chiminea I'd recently bought for cool evenings. I struck a match and watched the edges of the paper curl, turn black, and dissolve into smoke, rising into the clear blue sky. The last remnants of their poison, their twisted logic, their blame, all of it turning to ash and drifting away on the breeze. It was a better funeral than they deserved. I sat down in one of the new lounge chairs on my patio, a fresh cup of coffee in my hand. The old oak tree, the heart of this property, provided a perfect canopy of shade. The garden I'd been working on was starting to bloom, with vibrant, defiant bursts of color along the stone path. It was peaceful, not just quiet, but a deep, soul-settling peace that I had been chasing my entire life, from one rented house to the next. For so long, I had thought that family was something you were born into, a non-negotiable contract of loyalty, no matter how dysfunctional. My experience had taught me something different, something more profound. True family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about people who see your boundaries and not only honor them but help you defend them. It's about people who protect your sanctuary, not people who see it as a resource to be plundered. It's about people who help you build your foundations, not people who try to knock them down for their own selfish gain. I thought about Eleanor's offer of forgiveness, and I realized what true forgiveness was. It wasn't about letting her and her family back into my life. It wasn't about absolving them of their sins. True forgiveness was for me. It was about letting go of the anger, the bitterness, and the resentment that had taken up residence in my head for so long. It was about evicting them from my mind just as I had evicted them from my house. The house was finally what I had always intended it to be. A home. Not a fortress against the world, but a safe harbor within it. My life was my own again, built on a foundation of self-respect that no one could ever shake. I had faced the storm, and I had come out the other side, not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and finally, truly at peace. I took a sip of my coffee, leaned my head back, and smiled at the rustling leaves of my old oak tree. I was home. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.